This is the webinar for internationalization. Basically, what is included in this webinar is how to set up glossary maintenance for multilingual support. You develop your application in one language, and then you want to deploy it in multiple languages. So the way to do that is to start with the system parameters. In system parameters, it allows you to define glossaries. So right now I have a Spanish glossary defined. So I basically have two glossaries. My default English glossary, which I developed my application in, and also a Spanish glossary. These glossaries are maintained in a file called DesignBais Glossary. So the first thing you want to do is come in here and define a glossary. By default, these are all, there's nothing in here. If you want to create a glossary, you simply go in, enter in the glossary name and a glossary description, and then click on Submit. What that will do is it will set up pointers in the glossary file for that glossary. Now, to use that, I'm just going to quickly show you a form that I've created. I'm sure you've seen this form many times throughout the webinar series, but it's just a simple form. Client name, search, submit, and clear forms. I'll turn the test mode on. So I can type in C00100, see the client. When I get to the client name, I can type in Fred. It comes back and says no Freds please, because it's going back and doing a validation on the back end for Fred and saying, oh, no, you can't enter Fred in this field, send out a message. There is a search process. Sorry about that. Let's get rid of that. Clear that. There is a search process, and all of the names and addresses are here. So you simply click on the one that you want, and it brings it up. So that's basically the form. There's not much to that. And so now that I've created my form, I want to tell DesignBais to also display this form in Spanish. So the way I need to do that is then go into the glossary maintenance and select my glossary. So I have my default, which is English, and now I can select my Spanish glossary. So now there are 4 different types of messages. There's the screen labels, there's program messages, help text, and menu options. And we'll go through each one of these. We'll start with the screen prompts. So as soon as I select screen prompts, I have the ability to list all of them, list the ones that are not translated, list not A's through Z's, which means numerics, symbols, whatever. Or I can then just go in and select anything that begins with that letter. So if I select all items, you'll notice that, let's select a C. So there's 40 items in that selection criteria. So if I scroll down here, you'll see that not only are the application forms loaded into the glossary, but also the DesignBais toolset labels are loaded into the glossary, so that you can define a screen like Express. If Express is on a client's menu, a user's menu, you can translate all of the English terms on any DesignBais form into Spanish or into your glossary. So you can see that all of those items are in there for the DesignBais application. So it's something you want to think about when you develop your application and you create your definitions and your glossaries as to what is being changed here and what you want to display. So you can see I put in a few in the Spanish: city, clear. So these are part of these items here. There's a city and town, the clear button. If we scroll down, you'll see client code, You'll see client maintenance demo, which is the top banner, the client name, and so forth. Okay, so we have all of these here. So basically what it's doing is showing the original text in your default language on the left side, and then you enter in what it's converted to on the right side. Okay, so I think this is wrong. I think that's supposed to be like an NU. Not 100% sure, but so you put in what is converted on this side. Now, there are a lot of terms here, and once you get all your applications done, you may want to export this list to an Excel spreadsheet. There are services out there that you can send this spreadsheet to. They will convert the languages for you and then send them back. And then you could bring them back in and reload your glossary with those definitions. So it makes it very easy at that point. But let's just go and take a look at this. So I've entered in some of the translations for Spanish. So now, once I get all these done, submit it. The next step, and I'll just create a duplicate here. Move this over here. The next step, once you've created your glossary and once you have all of your conversions done, or all of your translations done, is you want to come into the user's record and change their default glossary. So by default, quote unquote, a user, and I'll just bring up my user, is the default glossary. So that's whatever language I used to build my application. In this case, it's English. I also have a user called test user, okay, that is now in Spanish. I don't need logging on. So is now in Spanish. So what DesignBais will do, as soon as that user logs in and displays the first form, on the fly, DesignBais will take that first form and substitute all the screen labels for what the screen labels are on the default language. So if I start, I submitted that, good. If I start a new session, okay, and go into my application and say test user. Before I do that, let me just show you here in test user. You'll see that I go into DBI demo and I run a start form, DB client underscore demo. So that is the form that I want the user to see first. If you're in a development environment, then you normally would see DBI forms underscore develop. But I want this form to be displayed as soon as this user logs in. So let's go back here and go to test user and run this. Okay, so now you see that as soon as it as soon as the user logged in, it read the form, went through all the screen labels, and searched for that screen label in the glossary. If it found it, it substituted the term for each of the terms that are on the form. Okay, and then presented that to the user. If it doesn't find a conversion for it, it leaves it the same. Like it didn't find subform in my Spanish glossary, so it left subform exactly like it was. So I have the same functionality, Z00100, and I didn't have to change any code in my database or in DesignBais besides just creating all the the glossaries. I didn't have to change any back-end code. I didn't have to change any forms. I didn't have to duplicate any forms. DesignBais handles the substitution of the text for you. So are there any questions about how I did this? Along with this, you'll see that I have a search form, and I did make a couple, sorry, let's get rid of that, let's clear it so you can see it better. I did make a couple changes, like I changed the title of the search form. It's bringing these definitions in from the form itself. I've already made those changes, but I can very easily go in and say, okay, this search button is now whatever search is in Spanish. So I can change all of these forms and all of these fields so that if the user is Spanish, they will see the Spanish equivalent to these terms. If I then search this, I didn't change any of these report headings, these multi-value headings. So those would have to get changed. But you can see where it functions exactly like it was. I'll probably have it open somewhere. Any questions about this before I move on? Okay, let's move on. So let's go back to our previous screen. And so now let's go into program messages. So you'll see here that when I run this form, and I showed this to you before, if I type in Fred here, whoops, it comes back and says no Freds, please. Well, that's an English term, so we want to convert that. Now you need to do something specific on your text messages, on your messages sent to the user, to enable this. And I always tell people, when they develop their application, if they're going to display something to the user, whether that be in IERR.text or a DBDS, to always send the variable through dbi.g.glossary. That serves two purposes. If you don't have if you're not using the glossaries now, what this will do is it will send the error message once that Fred is entered. It will send the error message into DB Glossary. It will first search the default glossary to see if that label is there. If it's not there, it will add it to your default glossary. Then it searches the user's glossary for that term. If it finds it, it changes the term in IERR.text to whatever it finds in the user's glossary. So it's twofold. If you place this call in all of your subroutines from the start, if you're using IERR.text or DBDS, if you place that in at the start, you're already set up for multilingual. If you decide to use it, you can. All you have to do is put in your terms. All of your programs are already set up to use it. It's much easier to do at the beginning when you're developing your application than it is to go back and change all of these error messages or display messages once your application is done. So I put IERR.text in there. If we go to the glossary and look at program messages for no Freds, we'll do an N. Here we go. No Freds, please, and there is my conversion. Now, you will need to do something with, you will need to go through all of your error messages through your application, because when your error message is displayed to the user, when your message is displayed to the user, the call to the glossary will set up the original text in your default glossary. So you need to make sure that you loop through all of your error messages to get those in there. So if we then test this application, we go back over to our other window, type C00100, and come in and type in Fred. You will see now that instead of no Freds please, it's giving me my Spanish translation. Any questions about that? What you can also do is, instead of just saying no Freds please, you can say for client equal to, and in brackets put in DB key bracket. So now what this will do is it will display no Freds please for client whatever, but because it's got the brackets around it, when it gets to the client side, it will eliminate those brackets, and whatever's in those brackets will not be part of your translation. So that this is the translation you'll want to do, and whatever you put in DB key, whatever you put in the brackets will not be searched on and will not be included as part of that translation. Any questions about that? Okay. If we go into help text and look for, let's call this up over here. Let's go into field properties, look at DB client for the client name, and you'll notice down here I have the name of the client in the help text. So when running the form, if I press an F1, you'll see I have context sensitive help, the name of the client. Okay, so that's coming from the field properties. In the glossary, if we search for the name of the client, you'll see I have the translation for the help text. So as soon as you enter in the context sensitive help in a field property and submit it, the DesignBais goes and fills in the help text in your original, in your default glossary, so that you can go in and enter in all of your translations for those help texts. So if we then go and take a look at that again, and we're on the file name, I'm in the client name. If I press F1, now I get my converted help text or translated help text for the name of the client. Any questions? Okay, the last piece here are menu items. Let's list all of them. Right now it's just showing the DesignBais menu items. I don't have any menu items myself in any menu files, but the same thing happens with the menu. So any of these labels that appear in the menu will also appear in your menu items. So those will be also included. So as soon as you create a menu definition, those menus will be displayed in the language that you're using, or the user is using. The last thing is you don't really need to use glossary maintenance for multilingual. You might have a situation in your industry where you're selling your application to one company, and they may call a product a widget, but another company might call it a gidget or a gadget. So you can set up a glossary for each of those different term types and then set your users to use that glossary. So instead of setting all of your glossary terms, or instead of changing all of your forms to maintain that difference, so now you have to have two different forms for two different clients, but they do the same thing. The only difference is the name of the field is different. You can just go and create a glossary for that name and call it something different. Basically, that's internationalization. There's not really much to it. It's very easy and very easy to use and very easy to implement. I will stay on the line for a couple minutes to answer questions. We have recorded this webinar, so I will place this on the site within the next hour or so. And if you want to go back to it, you'll be more than able to do that. So, are there any questions? Seeing none. Oh. I do have a question from somebody. Are locales required? Locales are handled by the browser itself. They are not handled by DesignBais. So the settings in your browser set up all locales. So it's based on the client and where the client is and how they have their PC set up. Any other questions? Aren't the messages held on the server? Yes, they are, but locales are used for time and date conversions and local times and date. The keyboard functionality is based on locales. The messages are on DesignBais and set up through system parameters. Okay. Not seeing any other questions. If you have any other questions, you can email support@designbais.com. We'll be more than happy to answer those. Like I said, these are recorded, so you can go on later on today and view it again. Thank you very much for your time. We have one more webinar in this series, and that's on Friday, and I believe it's on deployment. So thank you very much, and have a great day.